Hello, fellow readers. I've been following this blog for quite a few years, and I never imagined I'd be in a situation where I'd need your advice, but here I am. I'm a 24-year-old guy, you can call me Jeff, and my fiancée is a 22-year-old woman. Let's call her Julie. I first met Julie at a fast casual restaurant where she works as a cashier and serves beverages. Right from the start, I found her extremely attractive and would always find reasons to strike up a conversation with her. If she happened to be busy with another customer, I let them go ahead of me just so I could place my order with her. Gradually, I began frequenting the restaurant for lunch about 2-3 times a week just to chat with her, but I never quite found the courage to ask her out. Then one day, while she was ringing up my order, she wrote her phone number on the back of my receipt and encouraged me to call her that evening, expressing how much she enjoyed our conversations. I did just that, and we talked for a solid 2 hours. Toward the end of our conversation, I mustered up the courage to ask her out on an official dinner date. The date went really well, and she opened up to me about her life, revealing that she is the mother of a 4-year-old boy. She became a mother during the beginning of her senior year in high school. As she told me, the child's father was never a part of the child's life. He moved to Georgia after graduation, and she hasn't had any contact with him since. She also mentioned casually dating a few other guys in the past, but nothing had turned serious. On my end, I had 2 previous girlfriends before Julie. When I learned about her child, I expressed that I'd like to maintain our friendship but wasn't interested in pursuing anything more, given her existing responsibilities as a mother. She was understanding and agreed with this arrangement. We continued to hang out, meeting up once or twice a week, just enjoying each other's company. This dynamic continued for nearly 2 months until one day she surprised me with a kiss. From that point, our next 3 dates gradually became more passionate, and eventually, we took our relationship to the next level. It was an amazing experience, and from then on, I was fully committed. We started spending every evening and weekend together, and after a couple of weeks, she introduced me to her son, whom we'll call Josh. Josh and I immediately connected, and he started joining us almost every time we were together. Even though I initially had reservations, I ended up falling in love with Julie and her son. When I discussed the situation with my parents, they had their doubts. They believed that, given my recent graduation and stable job, I could find someone else. My mother questioned whether I truly wanted to take on the responsibility of raising another man's child. I clarified that we weren't at that stage yet, but would consider it in the right circumstances. A few weeks later, I introduced Julie and Josh to my parents, and their opinions began to shift. They found Julie to be very nice and quickly developed a fondness for Josh. Afterward, they expressed their approval of our relationship but advised caution since I had only known Julie for a few months at that point. I assured them that I would proceed at a comfortable pace. During that period, Julie had a roommate named Jane. Jane also worked at the restaurant with Julie and was engaged to be married. After Julie and I had been dating for 8 months, she informed me that Jane wanted to move in with her fiancé, but Julie couldn't afford the rent without Jane. After some consideration, I decided to move in with Julie and Josh, allowing Jane to make her move. I had lived with my parents throughout my entire life, even during my college years, and I felt it was time for me to become more independent. Julie and Jane supported my decision, but my parents strongly objected. They emphasized that it was ultimately my choice, but expressed their concerns. I reassured them that it wasn't a long-term commitment, and I wouldn't be signing a lease. I was simply taking over Jane's share of the rent payment. When I moved in, there were still 7 months left on the lease. Fast forward, Julie, Josh, and I have been living together for almost 5 months now, and everything has been going smoothly. I had developed strong feelings for Julie, and I had grown very close to little Josh. We were so close that he once told me he wished I were his dad. Even though I suspected Julie encouraged him to say that, I knew he genuinely liked me. As I mentioned, everything was going well until an unusual incident occurred about 3 weeks ago. One night, after Josh had fallen asleep, Julie and I were talking. She mentioned that one of her co-workers, Jamie, found me attractive and expressed interest in being intimate with me. Shockingly, she also revealed that Jamie's husband wanted to have an affair with her. I was completely taken aback and disgusted by this revelation. I informed Julie that I appreciated the compliment but had absolutely no interest in being intimate with Jamie. I also inquired about Jamie's husband, and this was the first time Julie had mentioned anything about this situation to me, which left me quite upset. Rather than addressing my question directly, Julie proceeded to ask if I was aware that Jamie and her husband were bi, and involved in an open relationship. I responded, "No." "How would I have known that unless you told me?" Julie then wanted to know if I thought any less of them, to which I replied that I didn't judge them. I mentioned that, as adults, they were free to make their own choices, but that such a lifestyle wasn't something I personally embraced. And I hoped it wasn't something Julie was considering either. We concluded the conversation there, but Julie's demeanor left me pondering this matter intermittently over the past few weeks. Now, let's fast forward to yesterday, or more precisely, last night, when everything took a dramatic turn. Julie's former roommate, Jane, and her long-term boyfriend got married. They had a civil ceremony at 5:30 p.m., followed by a lively reception. The party extended into the early hours of the morning. I typically don't consume alcohol, and I was the designated driver for Julie and several of her friends due to my large SUV. The group consisted of Jamie, her husband, and another coworker of Julie's, Jess, who attended the wedding solo. These three friends had plans to indulge in drinking and get intoxicated. Julie mentioned she would limit herself to only 1 or 2 drinks, claiming she didn't get drunk anymore. In fact, I had never witnessed her drink prior to last night. As the night went on, everyone was enjoying themselves, imbibing and dancing. Around 11:30, I noticed that Julie appeared slightly tipsy, which struck me as odd, since I had only seen her nurse 2 drinks all night. I asked her if she had consumed more alcohol, and she replied in the negative. By this time, it was nearly 1 a.m., and the last of the partygoers were leaving. I gathered everyone who had ridden with me into my vehicle. Our first stop was Jess, the single attendee whom I dropped off. The next stop was at Jamie and her husband's apartment. When I pulled over, Julie mentioned that she needed to use the restroom. She exited the car and followed Jamie and her husband, whom I'll call Joe, up the stairs to their apartment. I remained in my vehicle with the engine running, assuming she would return within a few minutes. After waiting for about 10-12 minutes, I turned off the engine and decided to check on the situation. Upon reaching the door, I knocked and entered. Inside the living room stood Julie, along with Jamie and Joe, all visibly intoxicated from their conversation. Without any prompting from me, Julie suggested, "Let's sleep here tonight." I nervously chuckled and replied, "No, let's go." But what she said next left me stunned. Julie continued, saying, "They've got 2 bedrooms. You and Jamie can sleep together and me and Joe can sleep together." Hearing this, disbelief and anger welled up within me. I reiterated, "Let's go." However, Julie retorted, "I'm not going anywhere and you can't make me. You can stay here with us or you can leave." Frustrated, I approached her gently, reaching for her hand. She pulled her hand away abruptly and snapped, "Get off me!" In response, I said, "Okay," turned and exited the door. I was burning with anger at this point, thoughts racing through my mind at lightning speed. I drove back to our apartment, briefly contemplated returning to see what was happening. Then I realized I no longer cared about her actions at this point. I was done. I made the decision to pack all my personal belongings into my SUV and move out. So, from around 1:45 a.m. to just before 3 a.m., I went in and out of the apartment, loading up my vehicle. Subsequently, I drove to my parents' house and called them on the way to let them know I was coming over. They were not critical or judgmental, but my dad offered his perspective, saying, "Son, it's best you found this out now." The following morning, around 9:30 a.m., Julie called me, but I allowed it to go to voicemail. She left me a message as if nothing had occurred, saying, "Hi babe, it's me. I hope you slept well. I fell asleep as soon as you left. Come get me as soon as you can. I love you." She called again 15 minutes later, and once again I chose not to answer. She continued calling repeatedly. Her voicemails became increasingly frantic, and she also started texting me. In one of the texts, she admitted, "Jamie just told me what an a-hole I was to you last night. I'm so sorry, I didn't mean it. Please come get me." I did not respond to any of these messages. Approximately an hour later, she left me another voicemail, realizing that I had moved out of the apartment. In this message, her desperation was evident, as she asked why I had left and claimed that she was drunk, emphasizing that she didn't mean anything she had said. She also reassured me that nothing had happened between her, Joe, or Jamie. She concluded by saying, "I know you're at your parents' place, and I'm coming over." Upon hearing this, I didn't want her to create a scene at my parents' house, so I quickly sent her a text. She immediately responded with a text, pleading for me to come back home. I replied simply, "No, we are done." She texted back, claiming it was all a big misunderstanding. Again, I responded firmly, "We are done." She then texted back, saying she was coming over to my parents' house. I messaged her, letting her know that I was leaving for the day and wouldn't be there when she arrived. I informed my parents about her impending visit and expressed my desire to avoid seeing her and any potential scene she might create. At this point, I had no idea how she would react, as she had been a completely different person last night from the woman I had known. I left the house and headed to a coffee shop, planning to stay there until she left. I asked my parents to call me if she showed up. About half an hour later, my dad called and informed me that Julie had been there and had left. He had greeted her at the door and informed her that I wasn't at home and that he didn't know when I would return. This all transpired just a few hours ago, and I'm still here at the coffee shop, typing out this lengthy post, which has been quite cathartic, by the way. Now I'm experiencing some doubts regarding my choice. Do you believe I reacted too strongly, or was my decision justified? Julie has been a fantastic partner until last night. Will this be something I'll reflect on in 10 years with regret or celebration? Final update. Hello everyone, I've received several requests for an update, so I wanted to fill you in on the current situation. Julie and I are officially no longer together. The whole ordeal with her turned out to be a massive deception. It's incredible how naive I was. I want to clarify that I haven't spoken to Julie in person or on the phone since the day everything came to light. We've only communicated through text messages. Right after my last post, Julie kept texting me insisting that nothing happened between her, Joe, or Jamie. She even had both Joe and Jamie call me and leave messages, claiming they were all just friends and nothing else had ever occurred between them. They swore on their lives and more to this fact. Well, I've since learned that this was far from the truth. Recently, I joined an axe-throwing class offered at a local pub. In my class was the single girl who had ridden with us to the wedding, Jess. After our first class, I asked Jess if she had time to grab a drink and catch up, and she agreed. We were chatting, and she inquired about the reason behind my breakup with Julie, so I told her. The first thing Jess revealed was that Julie, Jamie, and Joe were downing shots at the wedding every time I took a break to go to the bathroom or get some fresh air. What she disclosed next shook me to my core. Jess mentioned that Julie, Jamie, and Joe have been engaging in threesomes regularly for the past 2 years. She assumed I knew about it since Julie had told everyone we were polyamorous. According to Jess, this unconventional relationship was common knowledge among the restaurant staff, and I could confirm it with Jane or anyone else from there. My initial thought was, when did they find the time to do this? Julie and I were rarely apart, except when we were at work. What a fool I've been. But I've certainly learned my lesson. I've become a much wiser and stronger person through all of this. Regarding Julie being bi and polyamorous, if that's her preference, fine. But why did she have to deceive me like that? What a terrible thing to do. From now on, I'm strictly into casual dating. On that note, Jess and I have started a friends with benefits arrangement, and it's been fantastic so far. Julie has no idea. She still reaches out to me every few days, pleading for me to return. I've never responded, and I never will.
All right, that was a fun story. Now let's move on to another exciting one. Stay tuned, and let's dive in.
I'm a 27-year-old guy, let's call me Marvin, and I've been married to my wife, who is 25, we'll call her Mary, for a little over 6 months. Our journey began about 4 years ago when we met at a wedding reception, which almost didn't happen for her. Mary attended the wedding as a last-minute guest with a friend who was part of the bridal party. I noticed she was spending some time alone while the bridal party was busy with photos, so I decided to strike up a conversation. We clicked right away, began dating, fell in love, and eventually moved in together a year later. Everyone around us thought we were the perfect couple. In terms of work, Mary holds a staff position at a large company, and I work in a professional role at a company's headquarters. I won't delve into more specifics to safeguard our privacy. Our entire relationship felt like a dream, and I woke up each day looking forward to it. However, just a few days ago, my once perfect marriage shattered into countless pieces. It happened on a Thursday, and I arrived home around the usual time, approximately 5:30 p.m. To my surprise, Mary was already there, wearing a mini skirt and an apron. Normally, she doesn't get home until 6 p.m. She welcomed me at the door with a warm kiss and hug, mentioning that she left work early to prepare my favorite dinner. She had even picked up our favorite wine and a cheesecake we both adore. Mary wanted to pamper me to show her love. I was so excited that I carried her into the bedroom, and things heated up before dinner. After our passionate moment, We sat down to eat. She sat on my lap, and we shared hugs and kisses in between bites and sips. Once we finished the meal, she stood in front of me, pressing her lower chest and stomach against my face. I wasn't sure what she was up to, but I played along. She then asked me to look up at her and dropped the news. "We're pregnant." I couldn't have been happier. I stood up, lifted her, and twirled her around. We both laughed and, I must admit, shed tears of joy, as we had been trying to start a family since our wedding night. We loaded the dishwasher and sat down to enjoy our cheesecake. That's when I suggested we do a three-way call with our parents to share the news together. Mary liked the idea, so we used her phone on speaker mode to tell both sets of parents about the exciting news. They were overjoyed, as this would be the first grandchild for both families. Afterward, we cuddled on the couch and discussed getting ready for the baby. I felt incredible. Words can't express it. But then, things took a sudden turn. Mary left for the bathroom, and when she returned, she had an envelope in her hand, which she handed to me. She asked me not to be upset with her. I reassured her, telling her how could I be mad when she had just made me the happiest man in the world. As I opened the envelope, I found a 2-page handwritten letter from Mary to me. She began by expressing her love for me more than anything else in the world, followed by a string of all the wonderful things a wife could say about her husband. Then came the bombshell. She revealed that on 2 consecutive days just before Christmas, she had a romantic encounter with a co-worker from her company. She went on to say it was the biggest mistake of her life, and that she'd spend a lifetime making it up to me. Naturally, I was in shock by this point and asked, "What's going on?" She simply looked at me, tears streaming down her face, and said how deeply sorry she was. I questioned, "Is this for real?" She confirmed it and broke into tears again, expressing her sincere apologies. I pressed her for the identity of the man, but she refused to answer, insisting it didn't matter since it was in the past and would never happen again. I asked once more, but she still refused. So I stood up and headed for the bedroom to start packing. I didn't just pack clothes, I also gathered some of my personal belongings because cheating was a deal-breaker for me. While I walked toward the apartment door, she was on the floor, clinging to my left leg, crying. I continued walking slowly, gently trying to free myself from her grip. As I reached the door and opened it, she let go and stood up, and there happened to be a guy coming down the hall whom I greeted as I opened the door. After that, I drove straight to my car and traveled 20 miles away to stay in a hotel for the night. On the way, I phoned my nearby living brother and explained what had unfolded, and he couldn't believe it. He remarked that there might be no recovering from this, to which I replied that I wasn't certain because I felt utterly devastated and didn't want to dwell on it. He suggested that I come to his place, but I declined, saying I wasn't in the right state of mind to drive. So he insisted on coming over to the hotel to talk to me. The first thing my brother inquired about was whether the child was mine. My response was, "Oh man, I didn't even think about that." My self-esteem plummeted and I started venting my frustrations, with my brother patiently allowing me to let it all out. Once I had calmed down, my brother advised, "You need to devise a plan for how to handle this situation. I'll assist you." I initially expressed my desire to find a way to salvage the marriage, but my brother reasoned with me. He explained that I had a unique opportunity to walk away from this without major consequences, as an annulment of the marriage could be a possibility. He cited an example from our childhood where a neighbor cheated on his wife just 3 months into their marriage, and the wife was granted an annulment. By the end of our conversation, I still felt terrible, but I had a clear plan for my next steps. The following day, which was Friday, I had chosen to take the day off since I had worked 4 10-hour days the previous week, earning me a day off. I spent that day researching attorneys and managed to secure appointments with 3 different law firms. Throughout the day, Mary bombarded me with nonstop calls and texts. She didn't go to work and her voice sounded frantic. I chose to ignore her calls, but did reach out to both our parents to explain the entire situation. I also called her best friend and canceled the double date we had scheduled with her and her boyfriend for Friday night. Perhaps I shouldn't have disclosed our personal issues to everyone, but I was consumed by anger and a desire for revenge at that point. Later in the afternoon, my sister-in-law called, mentioning that Mary had been trying to contact her all day. She informed me that Mary had driven to their house twice to see if I was there, which was a 30-minute drive, illustrating her frantic state. My sister-in-law told Mary that I wasn't there, and that they knew my whereabouts but couldn't divulge the information. The messages from my wife were essentially incoherent, filled with frantic pleas amid sobs, containing all the things you'd expect from someone in her situation. On Friday evening, I treated my brother, sister-in-law, and parents to a lovely dinner at a nice restaurant. It was a kind of celebratory dinner for my brother and sister-in-law since their 10th anniversary was just around the corner. We had an enjoyable time, although our conversation mostly revolved around Mary and me. They all believed it would be best for me to seek an annulment, move forward, and start anew. However, I wasn't entirely convinced. They proposed that I meet with Mary the following day to break the news to her. My sister-in-law also insisted that I request a prenatal paternity test to determine the biological father of her baby. I had no prior knowledge that such tests were possible. I assured them that if the baby turned out to be mine, I would wholeheartedly love and be the best father to the child. If not, that would be Mary's responsibility to address. Throughout the meal, Mary called me 4 times, while my brother, mom, and sister-in-law each received 2 calls from her. Before leaving the restaurant, I phoned Mary and arranged to meet her the next morning at my brother's house. She had suggested meeting at our apartment, but I declined. I preferred a neutral location with other people nearby. When she arrived, I immediately informed her that our marriage was over, and I intended to file for an annulment. I also expressed my desire for a paternity test. She became very emotional and distraught. She immediately fell apart and knelt before me, swearing that the child was mine. She claimed to be certain based on the conception date. I insisted on the paternity test and assured her that if the child was indeed mine, I would be the best father possible. However, if it turned out otherwise, I would not have any role in the child's life. She cried, and I sat with her for over an hour while she sobbed. Eventually, I asked her to leave, and though she did so reluctantly, come Monday, things took a strange turn. Around 10 a.m., I received a voicemail from Mary's boss. Let's call him Tony. Tony is a man in his 40s with a wife and 3 teenage kids. In the message, Tony mentioned that Mary had informed him about our situation. He expressed a desire to encourage me not to give up on the marriage, citing his own experience with infidelity early in his marriage, which they had overcome and grown stronger from. He suggested meeting and discussing the matter, as he believed he could offer guidance to help me navigate this situation. This was unusual, very unusual. Until then, I had only encountered him a few times, and our interactions were limited to the typical pleasantries. I initially brushed it off and had no intention of returning his call. However, a few hours later, I received another message from him, this time with a tone of exasperation and nervousness. He said, "Hey, it's Tony again. I understand if you don't want to talk to me, and I don't blame you, but I'd like to clarify what happened and assure you that it meant nothing to either of us. Mary loves you and I love my wife. Please call me back. I believe we can find a way to resolve this." What a shock. That piece of garbage was the affair partner. I was so furious and filled with rage that I had to take the rest of the day off. Later that evening, I received another message from Tony. His tone sounded desperate this time. He said, "Give me a call, man. I believe we can figure out a solution between the 3 of us to save our marriages." Of course, I didn't call him. What a fool. Later that night, I got a call from one of Mary's cousins. Let's call him Kevin. Kevin and I have become close friends over the past few years. I answered, and he asked me to explain what's happening, as everyone in the family is in turmoil over your separation from Mary. I shared all the sordid details with Kevin, and he couldn't believe it. He remarked, "Wow, the rest of the family isn't aware of this. They assume you left Mary just because she's pregnant. They think you're the villain when it's actually Mary." Throughout the evening, I continued to receive calls and texts from Mary. It was evident that she was emotionally fragile. She pleaded with me to call her back and have a conversation, emphasizing how desperately she needed me. She expressed that my support was crucial in helping her navigate the difficult situation she had created. I didn't respond because I was thoroughly disgusted with her. On Tuesday, there was no contact from Mary at all. Then, on Wednesday evening, she left me a voicemail. Her voice sounded tired and melancholic as she said, "I've lost the baby." She requested that I come over to comfort her, as she felt completely devastated. Despite my strong desire to be there for her in that moment, I decided it wouldn't be wise. Additionally, my attorney had advised me against having any contact with her without a witness. I'm currently overwhelmed with guilt and questioning my choices. I still have strong feelings for Mary, and she occupies my thoughts constantly. I long for things to return to how they were before. Sometimes I even wish she had never revealed the affair, even if the baby wasn't mine. I'm certain I won't find someone like her again. What would you recommend I do? Update. Hello, everyone. I'm returning here to provide you with an update on my situation. I'm still in the process of getting divorced, or more accurately, annulled. This should be finalized within the next 45 days. Since my last update, numerous events have unfolded, and I've come across some new details regarding my wife's affair. Where should I begin? You may recall Kevin from my original post, who happens to be Mary's cousin, and with whom I've developed a close friendship. His mother is Mary's maternal aunt. She receives direct updates from Mary's mom, and Kevin then shares these details with me. Naturally, they remain unaware of this. According to Kevin, Mary reported Tony, her boss, to HR, and as a result of an investigation, he was terminated from his job. Contrary to Mary's initial claim that the affair concluded before Christmas, Kevin revealed that it actually began the week before Thanksgiving and continued until Mary discovered her pregnancy, which was just a couple of weeks before she broke the news to me. Mary didn't miscarry the baby. She underwent a medical procedure because Tony pressured her after she confided in him about the affair and pregnancy, along with my intention to divorce her, according to Kevin. Tony was angered because their agreement was to keep everything secret. Mary eventually couldn't bear the guilt and told me. Mary told her mom that she believed I would forgive her for the affair and that we could have a happy family. This showed a lack of respect, according to Kevin, who also mentioned that Mary told me the same thing about the baby being Tony's based on the conception date. As I mentioned in my earlier update, Tony has lost his job, and there's talk that his wife is pursuing a divorce. Additionally, based on what Kevin shared, Mary has initiated a legal case against her company and Tony, alleging a hostile work environment. Surprisingly, she is still employed there, which I find rather perplexing. That's the latest information I have for now. Final update. 5 months later, I mentioned I'd return once the annulment was officially done, so here I am. I might appear happy, but truthfully, I'm experiencing a sense of relief rather than joy. Despite all the lies and deceit, Mary initially wouldn't agree to the annulment, which meant the legal process could have dragged on for a year or even longer. Based on information from her cousin Kevin, along with her parents' and sister's intervention, they made her realize that prolonging the proceedings would expose all her secrets in court. Eventually, Mary saw reason and consented to the annulment, which was finalized 2 weeks ago. Even though we're now divorced, Mary is still attempting to reconcile with me. She inundates me with text messages and voicemails multiple times each week, offering everything from a one-sided open marriage to sharing the settlements she received from her company and her lover. According to Kevin, she settled for roughly $100,000 from each party and ended up with around $150,000. I've consistently ignored her, and as Kevin mentioned, it's really getting under her skin. She's absolutely fixated on winning me back. She's even informed her family that reuniting with me is her ultimate objective, believing it'll happen eventually. Well, let me tell you, that's not going to occur. That sums up my story, at least for the time being. I appreciate all your advice. It genuinely confirmed I made the correct decision. Hopefully, all you newlywed guys here have taken some lessons from my ordeal and can steer clear of something like this in your own relationships.
I need to share this story here because if I share it elsewhere, it could have serious consequences for my life. My boyfriend and I have been together for 3 years, and generally we've had a great relationship. However, I made a terrible mistake. There's this guy, let's call him Mike, whom I've been friends with for over 10 years. We are very close friends, and at one time during high school, we were teetering on being something more. But it never happened due to circumstances at the time. I was devastated, but came to accept it. But we've remained close friends over the years, and come to accept that we were meant to be nothing more. We move in the same friend circles, so we are thrown together often. Some of my previous partners have had a problem with me being close to Mike and other male friends, but generally they've never imposed any rules, so we never had to tone our friendship down. My current boyfriend is usually jealous and protective, but since Mike also has a girlfriend, it had eased my boyfriend's worries. 2 days ago, we hung out at this trendy place outside the city and were getting drunk. As it got closer to midnight, our friends started leaving one by one. Normally, I'd have left too, as I'm an early sleeper, but this day, something was in the air, and I felt it. Finally, our last friend left, and that left me and Mike with a few other random people in the bar. We decided to hang out a bit more, and were contemplating calling a taxi because we were both tipsy. But we never did call a taxi, as we both ended up in a room in the motel across from the bar. It was probably the biggest mistake of my life, but also the most sensational toe-curling lovemaking I've ever had. We had sex several times before falling asleep cuddling. The next morning, I woke up to the horrible realization and started breaking down. But Mike woke up and started consoling me. Then we ended up having closeness again, and by noon, we left to go to our respective apartments. Once I was on the bus, I checked my phone and saw about a dozen missed calls from my boyfriend, and a few messages on WhatsApp. His last message said, "You better get back soon." I was dumbstruck because that sounded threatening, and he's never been like that before. So I hurried back home and found him waiting there with his bags packed. The second he saw me, he started lashing out at me, calling me names like ho, slang, etc., and wouldn't even let me get a word out. I knew by that time what this was about, and somehow, word of what I did with Mike had reached home even before I did. I tried to calm him down, but he wouldn't have any of it, and walked out of our apartment with his stuff. On his way out, he said he hoped betting Mike was worth it because he's through with me. I went after him, literally breaking down in the parking lot, asking him to stop and listen to what I had to say, but he just drove off. The guards at the security post at the gate were watching and came to inquire after me, so I'm sure everybody in the complex has already heard of our ordeal by now. I feel intense guilt because I know my boyfriend has been faithful to me through and through. I feel absolutely terrible and don't know what to do. I don't want to involve anybody else, especially my friends. I know they'd be horrified and completely turned off by me. I do not know what to do, and I'm a total mess now. So I know everybody asked me not to contact Mike, but I did anyway. I had to warn him that my boyfriend knows, and he might alert his girlfriend too. But it turned out she already knew. One of her co-workers had been inside the bar when Mike and I slipped off to the motel from across the bar on the other side of the road. He had tipped her off, who in turn tipped my boyfriend off. So literally, by the time Mike and I hit the bed, they were aware. And we had closeness for hours, unaware that our respective spouses were aware of what we were doing the very second. I do not know what to feel or what to do now. My boyfriend has been completely unresponsive, and I think I'm blocked. I'm yet to tell any of my friends. I really do not want to, but I know it's just a matter of time before they come to know. Edit. Yes, I've been in contact with Mike. I do not have anybody to rely on now. I need some emotional support system, and considering I'm not getting it here either, who am I even supposed to turn to except him? Edit 2. Yes, Mike has been over to our place. No, I do not know what to do about our lease. It's been 4 days now since he left, and I think I've got to face the harsh truth. My boyfriend is my ex now, most likely. He's not on the lease, as this has been my apartment from the beginning, but he did pay rent. So yeah, he's not bound by the lease and can up and leave. And now I've either got to pay it all on my own, difficult given my income, or find a flatmate. My friends are still unaware. Edit 3. My friends have learned about the situation, and their opinions are mixed, which is somewhat reassuring because not all of them are completely turned off by me. Mike and his girlfriend are trying to work through things, so he's moved out of my place for the time being. I plan to post an ad soon to find a flatmate. I've been drinking excessively to numb my pain. That's the update. Feel free to criticize me if you want.